And then you were moving into your thing about going back and taking history. So, but you can start from I went to MTSU. And then,
Okay.
Yeah.
You ready?
Yeah.
So I went to MTSU, and my freshman year I actually ended up teaching newspack seminars to seniors because I spent my whole summer with my mentorship and learned so much more than that. So I found out very soon that you didn't really have to have a degree to do video production. The kids who were making C's but had amazing reel, they're the ones who got jobs. Straight A student had nothing to do with your creativity. So I spent a little time doing that. And MTSU is a great school, but most of what they focused on was broadcasting, and I would want to do film. And I couldn't afford film school, so I thought, well, I'll at least try to get a backup degree. And one thing I love is history. I've always loved history, and I love historical fiction. I love films that really embrace that. So I thought, I'll use this to write, I'll use it to study, and one day down the road when I get tired of traveling and doing freelance, I'll eventually settle down and teach, which is several years down the road. But years later, I had some friends contact me, and it was actually over doing a 48. We got back together. They were friends who were seniors when I was a freshman at MTSU, and we ended up winning some awards, and I started slowly getting back into it, and because I just got busy with school and let it go. And from that point on, I started doing plenty of film competitions. I got picked up. I did 2 feature films. One is A Father's Rights, based on a father that had a little girl out of wedlock, and he had to go through the court system and the mother to see his child. Very gut-wrenching, very heartfelt, but yet sad and true story. As a father who has a kid out of wedlock, you have really no rights, and so it educated me a lot on the court system and how it seems like maybe there are some holes in the way kids can be treated. So it really was, I think, a great piece to be made. Unfortunately, we're still waiting to see some kind of distribution on that one. I know the production company that has it, they've tried to do a few things, but haven't really tried to push it as far. But after that, I got picked up, and I made a great baseball comedy called Amateurs. We've now got it in front of Showtime, Comedy Central, and Summit Entertainment as of this last fall. Finally got a final edit done with it. But we had a great time with that one. It was a coming-of-age story of a bunch of men who had to grow up. They always got to play ball together since they were kids, and so they turned around, and between their jobs and families, they eventually, it was their last season, they could all play ball together. So they always kept their childhood whenever they were with each other, so they actually finally had to let go and grow up, and you followed them on this nice comedic tour of their last final season. So I'm really proud of that, and for the most part, I just still stick around and do freelance and help work with some buddies. I've done a lot of marketing and business ventures, especially for restaurants. I've done some PR and business work for that. So usually if it's anything I can do to be creative, I'd love to do it. I'm a Food Network junkie, because if I get in the kitchen and take all these fresh ingredients, I get to create a masterpiece. When we come here with a 48 and they give us these limitations and stipulations, you get to make something out of it, and that's just the part of me that becomes my drive. It's just one of my passions, is to produce something that's out of nothing. And I think that's what this whole team does. I think that's the passion of filmmaking, or just being an artist in general. So being able to wrap myself around these people and always spend time with them with all this great talent, that's just worth waking up for every day.
Okay, now if you can talk about like whatever frustrations or obstacles you've run into in general in your career, and kind of how you've dealt with them and moved on and all that.
Sure. I think sometimes people underestimate the overestimation of this business. I've seen people I've had to work with who they tell you that the film business is so hard to get into. It's not that hard. It's not that it's that much talent or that competitive. It's just oversaturated with actually a lot of people who don't take pride in their craft or the time to be the best at what they do. There's so many actors that will go out and say, I'm an actor, and they show up in an audition, but they don't practice or hone their talent. They don't actually put their passion into it. And unfortunately, on my end of that, I've seen that come out with some producers I've had to work for, who will get people excited, start a film like the first feature that I did, and it's now just sitting on a shelf. and there's nothing you can do about that. That's frustrating when you bring in people who bring all their passion and talent into something, and they make it worthwhile, and they build it into something, and then you see that doesn't reach fruition. I mean, that business is business. But you really hate to see a piece of work that does that. So I've had setbacks like that. Had almost one of the same problems with this baseball comedy. It took 3 years to get it back from a producer, so we could try to get the investors their money back, and so we could try to move forward with our careers. And, you know, any kind of distribution, being on the independent level like we are, is huge. And so fighting for that connectivity, for that part to be in there, is the big part. Probably one of the ways I've held myself back before, and I've had the guy who trained me years ago when I started out in grip and electric before I branched out into directing, was that sometimes that I stay in Nashville. He would constantly cuss me and tell me to get out of Nashville. And I always guess it seemed easier to be a big fish in a small pond, but there's so much more gigs somewhere else, and I guess sometimes because I won't venture out or try to completely pick up and move to Louisiana or somewhere like that, I perhaps have hindered myself. And maybe that's just part of me not wanting to completely let go. I guess what's hard to do sometimes is completely dive into it, because there are so many other things, and there's so many what ifs, because the business unfortunately doesn't have as much talent as people think, but it is oversaturated. And you've got some people out there who have been doing the job for years, and they're not qualified, and they don't have their heart into it, and then you go work and make a project, and it's a cookie cutter piece. I could never imagine having jobs like some of my friends do, working at a publication house, or just a house that does industrial videos, where you go in and almost make the same video for somebody every day. It's not creative, not challenging enough. And I guess sometimes that's my stubbornness. It comes out that I want to do something that's going to be full of heart and passion, and something that's going to be a joy to make. But I would say probably some of my biggest hindrances are myself, and not just really some of the circumstances.
Let's go the opposite way. Some nice breaks you got, or like, wow, that's cool, that landed in my lap, or that sort of thing. The blessings, the other side.
Okay. I have to say, doing the work I have and still coming through the obstacles of pushing through some of these pieces, I've been able to do some work, and some people may not consider it a big break or the one thing to do, but what it has allowed me to do is to go out and make videos for people who actually need them and need work to be done. I've been able to help do work with local church organizations who had known someone who's seen a film of my film, and they said, well, we could really use some help with this. And even when you get done with it, it's not the best project, but it's something that you help make a difference because it's for a positive attribute. I've helped do things for international missionary families and videos like that. And that makes things more worthwhile because those people out there trying to make a difference and provide some hope to the world. And of course, it always turns around, even when you work really hard on a gig that sometimes goes nowhere, that one person that you worked with on set, is working on another piece, and the next thing you know, someone says, well, man, we just had a guy like this, and all of a sudden your work ethic and your heart and dedication pays off, and they say, well, we know a guy like that. And the next thing you know, you get a phone call, and you're going in and you're picking up this extra gig, or you're coming in to help someone else make a film. I think those are the times that it's not the financially the best rewards, but when you get to have those connections that bring you into those projects, I think those actually mean a lot more. I think that's what makes you get up and go do it. I mean, it's not about the money, because if it was, you wouldn't have too many filmmakers. But it's about reaching those people and being able to have that opportunity. So I have to say, give or take, good or bad, it's always been a pleasure to be able to work with people who are passionate about what they do.
Final question. Pie in the sky, your dream project that you could do, like a particular genre, or if there's a story that you want to be told and stuff. And then when you do the project, what role do you want in it? Is it simply you want to be the director, or you'd also like to produce, write, act, whatever?
Okay.
and that'll finish.
I have to say I'm very guilty of having a huge Michael Bay complex. If there's a way to blow something up, I always do, or make it bigger and better and push the envelope. But on the flip side, with being one of the reasons I studied history, I mean, that's some of the stories I really like to tell. So to go back and do historical features very well would be fantastic. There's a great piece, it's called The Black Hand, and it's about a precursor to World War I. And it was these 15-year-olds to 19-year-olds being trained by the Serbians who committed acts of terrorism against Austria. Of course, back then they didn't call it terrorism. But Serbia was responsible for the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. It was a 19-year-old named Gavril Princip who actually took 3 attempts to finally take this guy's life. Well, then Austria comes to Serbia and says, well, we're going to investigate you for acts of terrorism. Kind of sounds like a familiar story for modern day times. Well, before you know it, Germany marches down on one side, Russia marches down on the other, people form alliances, and before you know it, a gunshot goes off 1 month to the day after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and World War I has started. It's a great story about the power of youth. It's a great story about how sometimes the people who you think are your heroes are actually the bad guys, and how patriotism and nationalism is all in the eye of the beholder and for what it takes. So I think that's something that's not only going to be a fun project to do as a period piece, but something that may help change people's perspectives. And on the other end, I've always wanted to do grand epics, and it's hard to really find one. I mean, they've made some good historical pieces or big epics, but I think the last time someone did it with true heart was when they did Braveheart. That was the only thing, no matter how much special effects people throw into it, you can't overcome having such a compelling story. And I've always wanted to do a story on the kingship for the Near Eastern ancient times. So you come in and start with this story of David, who was this warrior, musician, poet, but on the flip side, a liar, adulterer, murderer, and still a man after God's own heart, and what it takes to lead a people. And then you go back and do a precursor and do the story of Saul and lead into it, and then end out with the story of Solomon and the fall of a kingdom and of an empire that lasted 120 years. But to be on those battlefields, you know, to see their successes, but then their failures, and to see them as people who wanted to be more, but still held themselves back by being human beings, but also the way they were able to change and shape the world as we know it thousands of years ago, and we still hold to the principles or teachings that they did, and those still influence people's lives. Anytime you get to really go back and tell that story with heart and passion and do it the right way, that's the kind of pieces I'm after. I could go on forever for history pieces, but that's my thing. Big epics that I could do in historical proportions.
Perfect.